Thank goodness. Thank you very much, the Beck, for letting me know last night that I would be the keynote speaker. While I was actually in Mexico giving a talk at the Instituto Politécnico Nacional on a sediment model we're working on, and I guess according to the IPN, I have a PhD, and now according to the Beck, I'm an expert in green infrastructure. So I'm going to return to my work and ask for a big raise. Actually, the presentation you're about to see, I will apologize in advance because it's really sort of a Frankenstein of presentations from various people. I was sent a very excellent presentation from Region 6, and I will be relying on that. In fact, I have my notes here. I'll be reading from that quite a bit since you've seen this. You'll see this presentation one fewer times than I have. But I also wanted to give some local examples of green infrastructure, things we're doing in the region. And so I incorporated some slides from Hans Huth from Arizona Department of Environmental Quality, from our Dr. Yan Yangping from our EPA Office of Research and Development, and some slides that I've prepared for some work we've done in Tijuana. So, and anyone who's ever tried to combine PowerPoint presentations knows what a nightmare it is, especially at like 1 in the morning. And so I apologize if the formatting's off or if things don't make sense. Just out of curiosity, how many before this conference had heard of the term or had never heard of the term green infrastructure? Don't be shy. Okay. How many would consider themselves more or less an expert in the area of green infrastructure? Brad, for sure. Okay. This gentleman here, look around because I want you to note these people so that when the question and answer period comes, you know whom to turn to. And we will have time for question and answer. And I think this conference, I'm really grateful. This conference could not come at a better time because we are seeing in Region 9, we've invested, working with Mario Lopez from Conagua, we've invested, and as Mexico has a lot of effort and money in wastewater infrastructure. And now I think largely because of those efforts, we're able to look at some of these stormwater problems that are clearly evident and are having significant water quality impacts on the border. And so I wanted to thank the Beck for really a timely conference and hoping that you learn as much from this conference as I certainly will. My first introduction, I guess, to green infrastructure came when I was about 16. My dad was a school administrator, and he got me a summer job paving roads and parking lots. He thought he was doing me a great favor. It was the absolute worst job imaginable. He had to wake up about 4 a.m. and spend all day breathing fumes, asphalt fumes. I was very small, and so the boss, the foreman, was not very happy to have me working there. So after a few weeks, I started to get a little bit of confidence and felt like I kind of knew what I was doing. And when you pave parking lots, I'll give you a little trade secret. The one thing you don't want to have is sort of indentations where water can build and flood. And so we weren't very technical. This was a small operation. You kind of roll a ball and see which way it would roll to determine whether you had the correct contour. Well, I had seen what I thought was a low spot, and so I got up the nerve, and first time I went up to this man he was pure evil, just these beady eyes. He was chain smoking, even though we were breathing all these fumes. And I said, "Excuse me, sir, but I think there's a low indentation here." And he looked at me, and he looked over at the indentation, and then he took a drag on his cigarette, and he said, "What do you think you are, a frickin' engineer?" Except he didn't use frickin', of course. And I said, "No." I said, "Only a frickin' engineer would build a parking lot that would send the water straight to the storm drain." Actually, I did not, of course, say that. I was 16, and I don't think the term green infrastructure was even invented at that point, but instead I went on and became an engineer. So I've always actually wanted to go back and find him and point out that low spot. But so we are, I can't see the screen here, so I'm going to use my notes and then try to do this simultaneously. And I'm not sure. Oh, excuse me. Okay, does that work? All right. So my topic today will be on what is green infrastructure, what are the benefits, and Marilena touched on this, the benefits of green infrastructure practice, what does green infrastructure look like, and why is EPA, why are we here, why we're investing in green infrastructure, and then I'll go into some future plans that EPA has, and I will touch on, this is not in these notes, but I will touch on some work that we are doing in the border region. A little complicated. All right, the problem, of course, is urban runoff. Actually, right now, there's a big conference in California, the California Association of Stormwater Quality, and it's almost an entire week on green infrastructure because people are really starting to pay attention, largely because the Clean Water Act is requiring people to pay attention. But municipalities are starting to look at stormwater as a major source of pollution. And in most urban areas, it's drained, of course, through engineered systems and discharged into water bodies. And as you know, they come into contact with trash, bacteria, heavy metals, and other pollutants from urban landscapes. So communities are facing many challenges with the increase in impervious surfaces. It means higher peak flows, of course, and it means that, you know, even on the best days, we see in San Diego, for example, when we do water quality monitoring, that any kind of rainfall event will cause our beaches to become contaminated. And that's not because of sewage, that's just because of runoff from streets, you know, from people's landscapes. And so we've long recognized that it is now a leading cause in the United States of water quality impairment. So even small amounts of impervious surface cover can lead to significant impacts. Let me go, sorry. You were not following the same slide I was. All right, that's where we were. Can you go back? Okay. Let's get normalmente. All right. So, what is green infrastructure? EPA defines it as systems and practices that use or mimic natural processes to infiltrate, evapotranspirate, the return of water to the atmosphere, which is the return of water to the atmosphere either through evapotranspiration or reuse of stormwater or runoff on the site where it is generated. Green infrastructure uses vegetation, soils, and natural processes to manage water and create healthier urban environments. At the scale of city or country, green infrastructure refers to the patchwork of natural areas that provides habitat, flood protection, cleaner air, and cleaner water. At the scale of the neighborhood or site, green infrastructure refers to stormwater management systems that mimic nature by soaking up and storing stormwater. So, you know, one of the questions I had when I first heard the term green infrastructure is really what is the difference between that and low impact development? Does anyone have an answer? Because I still don't. I think it's sort of the term of art today for what we used to call low impact development. It's rebranding. All right, let me see how, okay. So green infrastructure solutions and water quality and quantity has benefits for pollutant discharges. It reduces flooding. It has stream and groundwater impacts. It, of course, has significant benefits to air quality by sequestering carbon. And it's a great benefit to the community. We all know, especially in the border region, you know, the amount of green space available for residents is very, very limited and gets smaller every day. So if we can do these types of projects that you'll see examples of that both increase the area of green spaces, that provide the community and residents with recreational opportunities while improving water quality, it's really a win-win. I'm going to get good at this fairly soon, but these are the terms that you will hear and may already know, but some of you may not. It's and there will be a quiz on this a little bit later, so you can write down these terms, or I'll share with you this PowerPoint in a bit. But rainwater harvest systems, detention pond, these are considered dry ponds. Retention ponds, which are considered wet ponds, and these are things like artificial wetlands or pools that capture stormwater but are maintained as wet, which, you know, really is probably in the Southwest is not a great or the best green infrastructure example. There's bioretention basin rain gardens, which are very common. We're seeing to treat things like the runoff from parking lots. There are media filters, porous or pervious pavement, vegetated swales, buffer strips, green roofs, infiltration basins, check dams, and rock flumes. And I'm going to give you an example of each of these. But again, this has huge benefits in all of these following areas. You can see so, why are we involved in this? Because and this is really important in the border region, it reduces flood risks. A study in Burnsville, Minnesota showed that a 93% in runoff volume after the installation of 17 rain gardens in a 5.3 acre neighborhood. It keeps water local by capturing rain where it falls. Urbanized Southern California and San Francisco Bay Area could boost up to some water supplies by 200 billion gallons a year. This is a significant issue, especially in California, in Southern California, where a lot of water that people consume is used for things like watering lawns and urban landscapes. So using stormwater as a means of doing that rather than using potabilized water that comes from Northern California or from the Colorado River really could be a huge benefit. Studies show that green roofs can reduce the energy needed for cooling on the floor before the roof by more than 50%. It uses less energy the trees providing shade, obvious things. And of course it can build coastal resiliency. Wave heights can be reduced by 50% within the first 16 feet of marsh and 95% after crossing 100 feet of marsh. All right, you're on the same page. So again, cities are investing in the United States, are starting to invest heavily in green infrastructure, building things like rain gardens, pervious pavement. You're going to hear these terms again and again. Reduce dependence on imported water, keeping water local, planting trees to cool the cities, and using living buffers as a means of reducing storm surges. So these definitions come from our Office of Research and Development in Las Vegas. And I just wanted to, rainwater harvest, okay, sorry, I went one too far. So rainwater harvest systems, I mean, they somewhat speak for themselves, but you can put these, you can install these at a house, at a household level or on a community building as a means of reducing, capturing the water that's falling on your roof. But it also not only provides a source of water, but what it can do is actually reduce the amount of runoff, which is very important in the Southwest region, where just even a small amount, I mean, I'll show you some slides about in Tijuana, but just the smallest trickle of water can cause significant erosion problems. And so, we're looking at the idea of maybe trying to put some of these in Tijuana and seeing what impact they might have on reducing erosion. The system either includes active storage of collected water in a receptacle or changing surface topography to slow capture runoff and increase water storage for sediments. All right, the next is dry detention ponds. These are also known as dry ponds or extended detention basins, and they're ponds that are designed to have a stormwater runoff, and in this case it says for 24 hours, but we've seen them even having a short retention time can really significantly reduce the amount of pollution, can allow, we're putting in the check dams we put in Nogales, Sonora has really created some dry, in essence, some dry detention ponds that allowed pollutants to settle out. And have also reduced peak flows. They're reasonably effective in removing sediment and other pollutants associated with particulate matter, and they can play a key role in downstream channel protection if appropriate designed. And again, that is by reducing the peak flow runoff from storm events. Now these are the wet ponds, and they're not, I've not seen them in the southwest region. Back east, I'm sure they're more common. I guess you would, I'll ask Brad this later, but perhaps, with wetlands that are used to treat stormwater, the problem with these are that they require a continuous source of water because they have to maintain the algae and the plant life to keep, and that's what helps reduce the bacteria. So if in the southwest region where our rainfall is so periodic, it's hard to maintain that. But you now know about it, so you can remember that term the next time you see one. Bioretention is rain gardens, and I like to think of rain gardens versus swales. Rain gardens tend to be used on a smaller scale for things like parking lots, and you'll see a lot of examples of these in some later slides. But they use landscaping features essentially in order to capture the local stormwater runoff. Finally. There are media filters. And I know Carmen is working with some people at Filtrex and using some of their compost as a means of providing these compost stocks as a means of reducing sediment runoff and trying to keep, again, the whole concept really, of course, is to try to keep as much stormwater on site as possible, to try to reduce as much the peak flows as you can, and to try to keep pollutants out of the storm drain system. And this is what these types of compost socks or sand filters can do at a very local level. Porous pavement is one of the most popular, and we have actually tried to do this in Tijuana. It's not, not super simple in that it requires typically that you understand your soil quality, you know how pervious it is, you have some type of substrate, some rocky material to go above the surface, and then you apply the pervious pavement on top of that. I think this is an area that really deserves a great deal of attention and to know where it's appropriate to do. I mean, the gym I work out at, we have it, and I do notice it does a tremendous job at actually reducing stormwater, and you never see flooding in that portion. If we had that when I was working in the paving business, I certainly would not have had to raise that issue. The thing is, we do see though on highly trafficked areas that it does wear down much more quickly, and so I think it makes a lot of sense for certain areas, and it's important to know where those areas are. And I'm really hoping that this is one of the things we get out of this conference is really being able to identify what are the appropriate green infrastructure practices for for each place, because it's so easy to just say, well, you can put in some pervious pavement here, you can put in some bioswales or some water cisterns to capture rainwater, but these things all cost money, and somebody has to invest in these. And if we can figure out, where are you going to get the most bang for your buck, I think that's the goal of becoming more educated in this area. Oops, sorry. This is the vegetated swales, buffers, and strips. These are very, very common. They're also referred to as grass channel, biofilters, bioswales, swales. They refer to vegetated open channel management practices designed specifically to treat and attenuate stormwater runoff for a specified water quality volume. As stormwater runoff flows, it is treated through vegetation, slowing the water to allow sedimentation, filtering through a subsoil matrix, or infiltration into the underlying soils. Swales are well suited for treating highway or residential road runoff because they are linear practices. Green roofs. Obviously, they kind of speak for themselves, but just putting in some vegetation on top of the roof as a means of capturing water and as a means of cooling, as a means of keeping the residents cooler. It can be effective in reducing stormwater runoff simply by capturing water, similar to what the water harvesting practices do. And I added this, don't try this at home, because I did see, it was a number of years back, and it was somewhere in Europe where an entire building had collapsed because it wasn't designed for a green roof, and somebody had just sort of over time decided, oh, this would be great to have a garden on top of my roof, and the weight of that material ultimately collapsed. So I think it's a great thing for new developments. For existing developments, you really have to know what weight your building is designed to take and study it well, as opposed to sort of trying it after you return from this conference. There are other things, of course, you can try, but that would not be one I would recommend. Finally, there's infiltration basins, and it's a rock-filled trench that receives stormwater runoff but has no outlet. This system is designed to infiltrate stormwater into the soil. Stormwater runoff passes through some combination of pretreatment measures such as a swale or detention basins, and then finally into the trench. There, runoff is stored in a void space between stones and infiltrates through the bottom and into the soil matrix. So this is really the final destination of the stormwater. We're going to go through some examples here, and this is a very large-scale example. Sorry, it would help. This is a very large-scale example in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, where an entire brownfield site was revitalized and to mitigate the impact of the 100-year flow event. And this is a 70-acre stormwater park that also provides a high-value community recreational asset. Where am I? How did that happen? All right. Here is the LA River, another very large project. And this is what the current designs, this has not yet happened. What is happening? Oh, I think I'm, sorry. Okay. This is the LA River, and this is what they are looking at the LA River. There are designs in place. Right now it's just lacking funding, but this is the ultimate goal of the LA River. And so, we see in Mexico and in the United States areas that are continuously being channelized for flood control. And meanwhile, the city of Los Angeles is spending millions of dollars actually trying to remove that concrete to return the system to a more natural system. So it really, I think, looking at trying to prevent sort of these problems can help us in the long run avoid expending huge amounts of money and trying to return the system to its natural state. So, audience participation time to wake you all up. This is, and anyone except for Brad, the top picture is a picture of one of the different practices I mentioned. And I was going to go buy some candy bars or something, but unfortunately I came straight here, so I have nothing to offer. Anybody? All right, I'll give it away. It's yes, I heard it. It's this is a rain garden, some curb cuts and a rain garden. And it was planted in the city of Austin. And then the one below this This one's an easy one. Even I got this one. Pervious pavement, right. Porous or pervious pavement. Thank you. This is in the San Antonio River. All right. This is so great because I have my notes here, so I know the answer before you all do. Anyone have a guess at this? Bioswales. It's hard to see from this photo, but bioswales, and this is in Beanham Wood in Harris County, Texas. So you know if Texas is doing this, anyone can do this. Sorry, it's not being recorded, right? All right, this one's pretty obvious itself. I'll just answer. It is green roofs, and these were established in 2014, also in Texas. It's a 70,000 square foot building, includes a living roof of 6,000 plants. It reduces rainwater runoff by absorbing rain that would eventually end up in the storm drain. And it has a heating savings of approximately $37,000 per year. Of course, it doesn't say how much it costs to build, but we'll ignore that question for now. This one, rainwater harvesting. Thanks, Carlos. Rainwater harvesting, this is in Santa Fe, New Mexico, and it's a 12.5 acre facility that captures and stores rainwater from nearby building roofs. Water is stored in underground tanks, as well as a 35,000 gallon that you see here, and water is used for irrigation throughout the park. This one's kind of not fair because this really is a combination of a lot of different things. This is at the University of Texas at Arlington. It seems like someone from Region 6 must have prepared these slides. By the way, if, on your comments, if you liked anything you heard, it was because of Region 9, and if you did not like it, it was because of Region 6 at EPA. This uses stormwater and the use of permeable pavements, bioswales, rain gardens, and larger bioretention systems. So this one is on the left, actually is this one's kind of tough. So it's a rock flume. I'm not seeing these very much. But the idea is really not so much to let the water infiltrate, but really to slow the flow so that it doesn't cause significant downstream impacts. It captures the runoff from an entire 70-space parking lot, and water flows through a rock flume to slow flow and capture floatable debris, and then into a native garden. The garden captures sediment and filters pollutants. And then attached detention area, there's an attached detention area to capture the remaining runoff. This one we've had before. So I'll just go quickly. It's the pervious pavement in Tulsa, Oklahoma. I don't think we had to reach all the way to Tulsa, Oklahoma to find an example of pervious pavement, but this certified, I guess the benefit of this is it certified 20 people as pervious concrete technicians, dramatically increasing the number of technicians in Oklahoma. The demonstrations lasted 2 years and is monitored quarterly by Oklahoma State University graduate students. So this is doing the kind of research I think is really needed in this area. This is a constructed artificial wetland in New Orleans, Louisiana. And we would refer to these artificial wetlands as a wet pond. It has educational interpretive wetland. It provides value to the community for educational purposes, provides temporary stormwater detention. And again, the reason this is a wet pond is because it has at least 6 to 12 inches of water at all times. And then finally, it has some deep pools to allow pollutants to settle. and it incorporates native wetland plants that tolerate inundation, flooding during large rain events. Okay, so, oh great, all right, let's go to an area that I actually know something about. This is the border region, and I've been told I don't have much time, of course, now that I'm getting to something interesting, but this is work that's being happening in the city of Tucson. And and this is really largely due to the work of people like NGOs like the Watershed Management Group and Brad's work. And he's going to be talking later, so I will leave that to him. But this is some of the work they're doing to create these local rain gardens as a means of capturing stormwater. And I'd really like to thank Hans Huth from ADQ for helping me. He sent me these at about 1 in the morning from his mom's house. Because I really wanted to have some examples of the local area. Here's some work that they've done in just a farmer's market to try to capture the stormwater runoff that would normally flow. Here's just a great time lapse of this community that has retained all of its stormwater on site. This is what it looked like before, and this is how it transformed over the course of about 3 to 5 years. So this is again, we know what these rainwater capture systems do, but they can take many shapes and sizes. These are people in Tucson who are making their own. You can buy these things that are now sold at the hardware store. These are some bioswales that have been installed in Tucson. This is just some landscape work that they've done. You know, as trees get removed, it changes the contour of the natural creek or river. And so what Stormwater Management Group has done is to actually go in there, and this was, I believe, with some funding from EPA, to recontour the areas in order to make the best use of the stormwater runoff. So how can we apply these in the Mexican side of the border? Here, just to give you an idea of what the problem is, we have significant flooding issues in Sonora. And when it floods, you'll see the arrows point to these the sewer system, and it overflows the sewer systems. So a significant problem, not just for the residents, but also because it causes damage to the wastewater infrastructure. So one of the work that ADQ has done is to look at, you know, what would happen if we tried to do some rainwater capture, and they've done some calculations on how much this could help just reduce these peak flow events. And you know, that one building, just to give you an example, the challenge is, of course, that one building, in order to capture a storm event of 2-year or 1-year return period, would take about 137 of these devices, and so it's not without its cost. These are some check dams that we have built with Border 2020 funds, and again, these are rock dams that allow the storms to allow the water to pass through but reduce the peak flows, and these have had tremendous benefits downstream. The USGS has actually modeled the reduction in flooding due to the reduction in peak flow. I'm going to move to Tijuana and just let you know, here's very quickly the problem we have in Tijuana with very rapid urban development. And we really appreciate the city of Tijuana being here today because we're trying to figure out how, and I know they are too, is when you have this irregular development, this sort of over the course of about 10 years, this is what it looks like today. There's no natural drainage, there's no road pavement, so that when it rains, this is what we see And of course, right north of the border, we have a estuary of international importance that supports about 400 species of birds that we're heavily invested, the U.S. government is heavily invested in trying to protect. And so this is the state of California in about 2003 built these sediment basins to try to capture some of this sediment. It also captures the trash, but they still are oftentimes, their capacity is exceeded, and this is what happens downstream when that native vegetation, these are saltwater marshes again, so they really require that influence of tidal influence, and so not only does the sediment bury the vegetation, but it changes that natural saltwater balance. And this is new development that's currently going on in Tijuana. We've looked at, with San Diego State, we funded them to do a preliminary study, and one of the conclusions they made very quickly was that the gullies are not surprisingly the biggest source of sediment. So the question is, how do we reduce these sediments? How do we reduce these gullies? How do we reduce this erosion? And so we have funded just recently the U.S. Department of Agriculture, San Diego State, CICESE, and University of Cordoba in Spain to do a model to really look at what would be the impacts, both what is the sediment flowing out of this watershed right now, or the subwatershed, and what would be the benefit by providing some green infrastructure. So we've done a lot of, one thing we've determined very quickly was the impact of these hard points. And this really shows how critical green infrastructure is, because especially when you channelize only a part of a stream, you can see what the profile looks upstream of this channel, and then immediately downstream, it really increases the velocity of that water, and so it has a tremendous impact on eroding the banks of that creek. And this is some of the efforts that the city is making to capture that stormwater, but unfortunately, and that sediment. But while these efforts will reduce the stormwater downstream, it's going to be still a very high maintenance item for the city to deal with. These are some efforts, both some of which EPA have helped pay for, some are just local efforts in terms of providing a little check dam made of tires, doing some revegetation efforts, some pervious pavement, and then these are just local efforts to try to stabilize the stream banks with tires. Those work really well until they don't work, and then we get all the tires downstream. So we're trying to look at ways in which we can invest in Tijuana with some green infrastructure and means of maybe trying to reduce that. So how is EPA involved with GI? I think you kind of got the sense of that, but we really are trying to do both outreach and education. We're trying to develop tools. The Clean Water Act has really been a driver for this, for the U.S. municipalities in pushing through the municipal stormwater program and permitting, in pushing cities to actually adopt some green infrastructure practices. We're trying to form partners. There's a huge amount of resources, and I'll be happy to make these slides available because and I apologize to Claudia for not giving them due service, because she has a huge number of different resources here in where we can provide some help and guidance and technical support. We also have funding opportunities. I know we fund universities to come up with designs on an annual basis, green infrastructure designs. You saw some projects that we funded through the border program, but the other agencies in the federal government have opportunities for funding as well. And then we have manuals. And I'm just going to go through these very quickly. So future plans, again, the Clean Water Act is really what's been a driving mechanism. So the question is, how can we sort of get these practices adopted in Mexico without that big regulatory driver? Because municipalities are having to develop these things to comply with their municipal stormwater permits, but that's not necessarily the case in Mexico. So here's just a video that I wanted to really recommend that the Surfrider Foundation put together. And I wanted to show it and just walk away today and let the video entertain you, because it's just, they did a fantastic job at showing sort of the benefits of green infrastructure and just how sort of crazy the water cycle has become today. And so with that, I thank you, and again, I thank Claudia and my colleagues at the Arizona Department of Environmental Quality for their help, and the BEC, and I appreciate the opportunity to speak to you today. Thanks.